We're reading Aesop's Fables. This is a collection, so I'm just going to be reading from the beginning. The Fox and the Grapes. A hungry fox saw some fine bunches of grapes hanging from a vine that was trained along a high trellis, and did his best to reach them by jumping as high as he could into the air. But it was all in vain, for they were just out of reach. So he gave up trying and walked away with an air of dignity and unconcern, remarking, "I thought those grapes were ripe, but now I see they're quite sour." The Crow and the Pitcher. A thirsty crow found a pitcher with some water in it, but so little was there that, try as she might, she could not reach it with her beak, and it seemed as though she would die of thirst within sight of the remedy. At last she hit upon a clever plan. She began dropping pebbles into the pitcher, and with each pebble the water rose a little higher, until at last it reached the brim, and the knowing bird was enabled to quench her thirst. Necessity is the mother of invention. The Goose that laid the golden eggs. A man and his wife had the good fortune to possess a goose which laid a golden egg every day. Lucky though they were, they soon began to think they were not getting rich fast enough, and imagining a bird must be made of gold inside, they decided to kill it in order to secure the whole store of precious metal at once. But when they cut it open, they found it was just like any other goose. Thus they neither got rich all at once, as they had hoped, nor enjoyed any longer the daily addition to their wealth. Much wants more and loses all. The Cat and the Mice. There was once a house that was overrun with mice. A cat heard of this and thought to herself, "That's the place for me," and off she went and took up her quarters in the house, and caught the mice, and one by one ate them. At last the mice could stand it no longer, and they determined to take to their holes and stay there. "That's awkward," said the cat to herself. "The only thing to do is coax them out by a trick." So she considered a while, and then climbed up on the wall and let herself hang down by her hind legs from a peg, and pretended to be dead. By and by a mouse peeped out and saw the cat hanging there. "Aha!" it cried. "You're very clever, madam, no doubt, but you may turn yourself into a bag of meal hanging there if you like, yet you won't catch us coming anywhere near you. If you are wise, you won't be deceived by the innocent airs of those whom you have once found to be dangerous." Mercury and the Woodman. A woodman was felling tree on the bank of a river, when his axe, glancing off the trunk, flew out of his hands and fell into the water. As he stood by the water's edge, lamenting his loss, Mercury appeared and asked him the reason for his grief, and, on learning what had happened, out of pity for his distress, he dived into the river, and, bringing up a golden axe, asked him if that was the one he had lost. The woodman replied that it was not, and Mercury then dived a second time, bringing up a silver axe, and asked if that was his. "No, that is not mine either," said the woodman. Once more Mercury dived into the river, and brought up the missing axe. The woodman was overjoyed at recovering his property, and thanked his benefactor warmly. And the latter was so pleased with his honesty that he made him a present of the other two axes. When the woodman told the story to his companions, one of them was filled with envy of his good fortune, and determined to try his luck for himself. So he went and began to fell a tree at the edge of the river, and presently contrived to let his axe drop into the water. Mercury appeared as before, and, on learning that his axe had fallen in, he dived and brought up a golden axe, as he had done on the previous occasion. Without waiting to be asked whether it was his or not, the fellow cried, "That's mine," and stretched out his hand eagerly for the prize. But Mercury was so disgusted at his dishonesty that he not only declined to give him the golden axe, but also refused to recover for him the one he had let fall into the stream. The Hares and the Frogs. The hares once gathered together and lamented the unhappiness of their lot, exposed as they were to the dangers on all sides, and lacking the strength and the courage to hold their own. Men, dogs, birds, and beasts of prey were all their enemies, and killed and devoured them daily, and sooner than endure such persecution any longer, they all in one determined to end their miserable lives. Thus resolved and desperate, they rushed in a body toward a neighboring pool, intending to drown themselves. On the bank were sitting a number of frogs, who, when they heard the noise of the hares as they ran, with one accord leaped into the water and hid themselves in the depths. Then one of the older hares, who was wiser than the rest, cried out to his companions, "Stop, my friends, take heart. Don't let us destroy ourselves after all. See, here are creatures who are afraid of us, and who must, therefore, be still more timid than ourselves." The Mischievous Dog. There was once a dog who used to snap at people and bite them without any provocation, and who was a great nuisance to everyone who came to his master's house. So his master fastened a bell around his neck to warn people of his presence. The dog was very proud of the bell, and he started about tinkling it with immense satisfaction. But an old dog came up to him and said, "The fewer airs you give yourself, the better, my friend. You don't think, do you, that your bell was given as a reward of merit? On the contrary, it is a badge of disgrace. Notoriety is often mistaken for fame." The North Wind and the Sun. A dispute arose between the North Wind and the Sun, each claiming that he was stronger than the other. At last they agreed to try their powers upon a traveler, to see which could soonest strip him of his cloak. The North Wind had the first try, and gathering up all his force for the attack, he came whirling furiously down on the man, and caught up his cloak as though he would wrest it from him by one single effort. But the harder he blew, the more closely the man wrapped it round himself. Then came the turn of the Sun. At first he beamed gently upon the traveler, who soon unclasped his cloak and walked on with it hanging loosely about his shoulders. Then he shone forth in his full strength, and the man, before he had gone many steps, was glad to throw his cloak right off and continue his journey more lightly clad. Persuasion is better than force. The Charcoal Burner and the Fuller. There was once a charcoal burner who lived and worked by himself. A fuller, however, happened to come and settle in the same neighborhood, and the charcoal burner, having made his acquaintance, and finding he was an agreeable sort of fellow, asked him if he would come and share his house. "We shall get to know each other better that way," he said, "and besides, our household expenses will be diminished." The fuller thanked him, but replied, "I couldn't think of it, sir. Why, everything I take such pains to whiten would be blackened in no time by your charcoal." The Mice in Council. Once upon a time, all the mice met together in council and discussed the best means of securing themselves against the attacks of the cat. After several suggestions had been debated, a mouse of some standing and experience got up and said, "I think I've hit upon a plan which will ensure our safety in the future, provided you enact and carry it out. It is that we should fasten a bell around the neck of our enemy the cat, which will by its tinkling warn us of her approach." This proposal was warmly applauded, and it had already been decided to adopt it, when an old mouse got up to his feet and said, "I agree with you all that the plan before us is an admirable one. But may I ask who is going to put the bell on the cat?" The Moon and her Mother. The Moon once begged her mother to make a gown. "How can I?" replied she. "There's no fitting your figure. At one time you're a new moon, and another you're a full moon. And between whiles you're neither one or the other." Mercury? The Bat and the Weasels. A bat fell to the ground and was caught by a weasel, and was just going to be killed and eaten when it begged to be let go. The weasel said he couldn't do that because he was an enemy of all birds on principle. "Oh, but," said the bat, "I'm not a bird at all. I'm a mouse." "So you are," said the weasel, "now I come to look at you." And he let it go. Some time after this, the bat was caught in just the same way by another weasel, and, as before, begged for its life. "No," said the weasel, "I never let a mouse go by any chance." "But I'm not a mouse," said the bat. "I'm a bird." "So you are," said the weasel, and he too let the bat go. The moral of the story is, look and see which way the wind blows before you commit yourself. The Lion and the Mouse. A lion, asleep in his lair, was waked up by a mouse running over his face. Losing his temper, he seized it with his paw and was about to kill it. The mouse, terrified, piteously entreated him his life to spare. "Please let me go," it cried, "and one day I will repay you for your kindness." The idea of so insignificant a creature ever being able to do anything for him amused the lion so much that he laughed aloud and good-humoredly let it go. But the mouse's chance came after all. One day the lion got entangled in a net which had been spread for game by some hunters, and the mouse heard, and he recognized his roars of anger and ran to the spot. Without more ado, it set to work to gnaw the ropes with its teeth, and succeeded before long in setting the lion free. "There," said the mouse, "you laughed at me when I promised I would repay you, but now you see, even a mouse can help a lion." The Dog and the Sow. A dog and a sow were arguing, and each claimed that its own young ones were finer than those of any other animal. "Well," said the sow at last, "mine can see at any rate when they come into the world, but yours are born blind." The Fox and the Crow. A crow was sitting on a branch of a tree with a piece of cheese in her beak, when a fox observed her and set his wits to work to discover some way of getting the cheese. Coming and standing under the tree, he looked up and said, "What a noble bird I see above me! Her beauty is without equal, the hue of her plumage is exquisite. If only her voice is as sweet as her looks are fair, she ought without doubt to be the queen of birds." The crow was hugely flattered by this, and, just to show the fox that she could sing, she gave a loud caw. Down came the cheese, of course, and the fox, snatching it up, said, "You have a voice, madam, I see. What you want is wits." The Horse and the Groom. There was once a groom who used to spend long hours clipping and combing the horse of which he had charge, but who daily stole a portion of its allowance of oats and sold it for his own profit. The horse gradually got into worse and worse condition, and at last cried to the groom, "If you really want me to look sleek and well, you must comb me less and feed me more." The Fox and the Stork. A fox invited a stork to dinner, at which the only fare provided was a large flat dish of soup. The fox lapped it up with great relish, but the stork with her long bill tried in vain to partake of the savory broth. Her evident distress caused the sly fox much amusement. But not long after, the stork invited him in turn, and set before him a pitcher with a long and narrow neck, into which she could get her bill with ease. Thus, while she enjoyed her dinner, the fox sat by hungry and helpless, for it was impossible for him to reach the tempting contents of the vessel. The Wolf and the Lamb. A wolf came upon a lamb straying from the flock, and felt some compunction about taking the life of so helpless a creature without some plausible excuse. So he cast about for some grievances, and said at last, "Last year, sirrah, you grossly insulted me." "That is impossible, sir," bleated the lamb, "for I wasn't born then." "Well," retorted the wolf, "you fed in my pastures." "That cannot be," said the lamb, "for I have never yet tasted grass." "You drink from my spring, then," continued the wolf. "Indeed, sir," said the poor lamb, "I have never yet drunk anything but my mother's milk." "Well, anyhow," said the wolf, "I'm not going about without my dinner." And he sprang upon the lamb and devoured it without more ado. The Peacock and the Crane. A peacock taunted a crane with the dullness of her plumage. "Look at my brilliant colors," she said, "and see how much finer they are than your poor feathers." "I'm not denying," replied the crane, "that yours are far gayer than mine, but when it comes to flying, I can soar into the clouds, whereas you are confined to the earth like any dunghill cock." The Cat and the Birds. A cat heard that the birds in the aviary were ailing, so he got himself up as a doctor, and taking with him a set of the instruments proper to his profession, presented himself at the door, and inquired after the health of the birds. "We shall do very well," they replied, without letting him in, "when we've seen the last of you." A villain may disguise himself, but he will not deceive the wise. The Stag in the Ox Stall. A stag, chased from his lair by the hounds, took refuge in a farmyard, and, entering a stable where a number of oxen were stalled, thrust himself under a pile of hay in a vacant stall, where he lay concealed, all but the tips of his horns. Presently one of the oxen said to him, "What has induced you to come in here? Aren't you aware of the risk you are running with being captured by the herdsmen?" To which he replied, "Pray let me say for the present, when night comes I shall escape easily over the cover of dark." In the course of the afternoon, more than one of the farmhands came in to attend to the wants of the cattle, but not one of them noticed the presence of the stag, who accordingly began to congratulate himself on his escape, and to express his gratitude to the oxen. "We wish you well," said the one who had spoken before, "but you're not out of danger yet. If the master comes, you will certainly be found out, for nothing ever escapes his keen eyes." Presently, sure enough, in he came, and made a great to-do about the way the oxen were kept. "The beasts are starving," he said. "Here, give them more hay, and put plenty of litter under them." As he spoke, he seized an armful himself from the pile where the stag lay concealed, and at once detected him. Calling his men, he had him seized at once and killed for the table. The Spendthrift and the Swallow. A spendthrift, who had wasted his fortune and had nothing left but the clothes in which he stood, saw a swallow one fine day in early spring. Thinking that summer had come and he could now do without his coat, he went and sold it for what it would fetch. A change, however, took place in the weather, and there came a sharp frost, which killed the unfortunate swallow. When the spendthrift saw its dead body, he cried, "Miserable bird! Thanks to you, I am perishing of cold myself." One swallow does not make summer. The Old Woman and the Doctor. An old woman became almost totally blind from a disease of the eyes, and, after consulting a doctor, made an agreement with him in the presence of witnesses that she should pay him a high fee if he cured her, when if he failed he was to receive nothing. The doctor accordingly prescribed a course of treatment, and every time he paid her a visit he took away with him some article out of the house, until at last, when he visited her for the last time, and the cure was complete, there was nothing left. When the old woman saw that the house was empty, she refused to pay him his fee, and after repeated refusals on her part, he sued her before the magistrates for payment of her debt. On being brought into court, she was ready with her defense. "The claimant," said she, "has stated the facts about our agreement correctly. I undertook to pay him a fee if he cured me, and he on his part promised to charge nothing if he failed. Now he says I am cured, but I say that I am blinder than ever, and I can prove what I say. When my eyes were bad, I could at any rate see well enough to be aware that my house contained a certain amount of furniture and other things. But now, when according to him I am cured, I am entirely unable to see anything there at all." The Boys and the Frogs. Some mischievous boys were playing on the edge of a pond, and, catching sight of some frogs swimming about in the shallow water, they began to amuse themselves by pelting them with stones, and they killed several of them. At last one of the frogs put his head out of the water and said, oh, stop, I beg of you. What is sport to you is death to us." "You're stalking me, I can see you."